Deep in the rain-soaked wilderness of Washington state, where ancient cedars block out the sun and the Olympic forest seems to breathe on its own, a story has circulated for decades that refuses to die. It isn't a campfire rumor told by teenagers or a blurry tale from a lone hiker looking for attention. This story comes from trained U.S. soldiers, men accustomed to combat zones, strict discipline, and hostile terrain, who claimed they encountered something they could not explain during a routine operation in the Olympic forest. What they described was not an animal listed in any field manual, nor anything their training prepared them for. They would later say, without hesitation, that they believed they had encountered Bigfoot. The incident is said to have taken place during a multi-day training exercise in the late 1970s, though some versions place it slightly earlier or later. A small unit of soldiers was deployed deep into the Olympic forest for survival and navigation drills. The area was chosen specifically because of its extreme isolation. Towering trees, dense undergrowth, constant fog, and limited visibility made it ideal for testing endurance and teamwork. Radio contact was minimal, and the men were expected to rely on their training to move through the terrain undetected and unsupported. From the very first night, things felt off. Several soldiers later recalled an overwhelming sense of being watched. Not the vague nervousness that comes with sleeping in unfamiliar woods, but a heavy, persistent feeling that something intelligent was tracking them. The forest itself seemed unnaturally quiet. No insects, no birds. Even the wind appeared to die down after sunset. Veterans who had served in jungles overseas said the silence was wrong, predatory. On the second night, the unit set up a temporary bivouac near a small clearing. As darkness fell, they began hearing heavy footsteps moving just beyond the tree line. At first, they assumed it was an elk or bear. Olympic National Forest is known for large wildlife, and none of the soldiers panicked. But the footsteps were wrong. Too slow, too deliberate, and they were bipedal. One soldier reportedly whispered that whatever it was walking like a man, but much heavier. Then came the smell. Multiple accounts mention a powerful, nauseating odor drifting into camp. It was described as a mix of wet dog, rot, and sulfur, strong enough to make eyes water. Soldiers scanned the perimeter with night vision equipment but saw nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, yet the footsteps continued, circling them just outside visual range. Shortly after midnight, rocks were thrown into the camp. Not pebbles falling from trees, but large stones hurled with force and precision. One struck a tree hard enough to splinter bark. Another landed within feet of a sleeping soldier. At this point, the unit leader ordered everyone awake and armed, though strict rules of engagement prohibited firing unless directly threatened. Still, weapons were raised. Safety off. That was when they saw it. From the edge of the clearing, partially illuminated by moonlight breaking through the canopy, a massive figure stepped forward. It stood far taller than any man in the unit, later estimated between 8 and 10 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark, matted hair that reflected light in uneven patches. Broad shoulders, long arms hanging nearly to its knees, and a barrel-shaped chest gave it a silhouette that was unmistakably not human. Several soldiers froze. Others instinctively aimed their rifles. One man reportedly shouted, demanding the figure identify itself. The response was not a growl or roar, but something far worse, a deep, resonating vocalization that sounded almost like a language, layered with multiple tones. It wasn't animalistic. It was deliberate. The creature took a step closer. At that moment, one of the soldiers fired a warning shot into the ground near the figure's feet. The sound echoed through the forest like an explosion. The creature reacted instantly, not with fear, but with aggression. It let out a deafening roar that vibrated in the chest, then picked up a log, described as thicker than a man's torso, and threw it effortlessly toward the camp. It landed just short, but the message was clear. The unit leader ordered a tactical retreat. Training dictated disengagement from unknown threats. As the soldiers backed away in formation, the creature paralleled them through the forest, moving with terrifying speed despite its size. Trees snapped. Branches shook. At one point, 2 more figures were reportedly seen moving in the background, suggesting the soldiers were not dealing with just one entity. Eventually, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the activity stopped. The sounds faded. The forest slowly returned to life, insects and distant animals resuming as if nothing had happened. The soldiers regrouped at a predetermined rally point at first light, shaken, exhausted, and visibly disturbed. When the unit returned to base, the incident was reported up the chain of command. What happened next is where the story takes a darker turn. The soldiers were allegedly ordered not to discuss the encounter. Their after-action report was classified, and the event was explained away as a wildlife misidentification combined with stress and fatigue. Some men were reassigned, others left the service not long after. Years later, a few of those soldiers began to talk. In interviews conducted anonymously or under pseudonyms, they maintained consistency in their accounts despite being separated for decades. They described the same smell, the same vocalizations, the same overwhelming sense of intelligence behind the creature's eyes. These were not men seeking fame. Many were reluctant to speak at all, concerned about ridicule or professional consequences. But as they aged, the need to tell the truth outweighed the fear of being dismissed. Skeptics argue that the soldiers encountered bears, experienced mass hysteria, or misinterpreted environmental stimuli. Yet critics of that explanation point out several problems. Bears do not throw logs with precision. They do not move silently on two legs for extended periods. They do not vocalize in complex, multi-tonal patterns. And perhaps most importantly, trained soldiers are taught to identify threats under extreme pressure. Their survival often depends on it. The Olympic forest itself adds weight to the mystery. The region has one of the highest concentrations of Bigfoot sightings in North America. Indigenous tribes long before European settlement told stories of large, forest-dwelling beings known by various names, often described as guardians or warnings rather than monsters. These legends predate modern pop culture by centuries. There have also been other military-related encounters over the years. Radar anomalies, training exercises disrupted by unknown intrusions, reports quietly filed and never publicly addressed. While none have been officially confirmed, the pattern is hard to ignore. What makes the soldiers' encounter especially compelling is not just what they saw, but how it behaved. The creature did not attack outright. It displayed territorial aggression, warning them away rather than pursuing to kill. This suggests intelligence, strategy, and possibly even a desire to avoid unnecessary conflict. If Bigfoot exists, this encounter paints it not as a mindless beast, but as something closer to an undiscovered hominid, strong, aware, and deeply protective of its territory. To this day, no official explanation has been given. The U.S. military denies knowledge of any such incident. No documents have been declassified confirming it. And yet, the men who were there remain adamant. They know what a man looks like. They know what an animal looks like. And they know what they saw in the Olympic forest was neither. Whether you believe the story or not, it raises unsettling questions. How much of our world remains unexplored? How many encounters have been dismissed, buried, or classified? And what else might be watching us from the shadows of forests we assume we understand? One thing is certain. The Olympic forest is vast, ancient, and largely untouched. It has existed far longer than roads, cities, or governments. And if something has lived there for centuries, avoiding detection, learning our patterns, and defending its domain, then perhaps the soldiers didn't stumble upon a myth at all. Perhaps they stumbled upon a neighbor we were never meant to find.